Personal computers, a key element in modern life today, we use them for about everything, from professional work to hobbies. A world without them is almost unimaginable. However, computers weren't always available like it is today. It took history quite some time for such an amazing innovation to happen, and it is most importantly thanks to the creation of the microprocessor that it is possible to fit so much into a small unit such as a desktop and even a smartphone. Before the microprocessor revolution, the only computers available were large and most of the time room-sized machines. Not only were their efficiency and power incomparable to the machines that we use today, only big corporations had access to them. The creation of the personal computer was made possible thanks to the invention of the microprocessor, which was accomplished by new hardware technology. This phenomenon broke the technological barrier that held back all the possibilities, which ultimately led to modern-day personal computers that people use on a daily basis. Breaking technological barriers to create the personal computer. First of all, let's examine the word computer. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it is a programmable, usually electronic device that can store, retrieve, and process data. This means computers have been around for way longer than one would think. Now let's go back even further, way before the creation of the microprocessor. The first large-scale computer that is pretty well known was the electronic numerical integrator and computer, also known as the Eniac machine. The computer took up 1,800 square feet and weighed 30 tons, a monster compared to the size of computers today. The Eniac used nearly 18,000 vacuum tubes, which could only process one bit on the size of a thumb. However, not too long later in 1947, there was the invention of the transistor by William Shockley, John Bardeen, and Walter Brattain of Bell Laboratories, breaking a technological barrier. Though it only briefly replaced vacuum tubes for scientists, it was able to process one bit on the size of a fingernail instead. Then in 1958, another barrier was taken down, when Jack Kilby and Robert Noyce, using semiconductor technology, invented the first integrated circuit on a chip. This allowed thousands of bits to be processed on the size of a hand. This increased the speed of machines and was the precursor to the microprocessor that would be invented later. Robert Noyce, alongside one of his colleagues, Gordon Moore, would then found Intel in 1968. By the 1960s, large mainframe computers began to become common among big industries. This is also when companies began racing to take it to the next step, which would bring single-chip central processing units, also known as CPUs, into the world. A major reason for such a technological spark during these times was due to the focus on math and science education in the United States, especially with the National Defense Education Act of 1958 as a response to the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik, which broke barriers into the space age.
Well, Dr. Newell, what about the vital question that everybody is thinking about? Why and how did the Russians beat us to the draw?
Well, it was something of a surprise, and naturally, since this generates a certain amount of scientific rivalry, something of a disappointment to us.
This truly allowed innovation to occur and new barriers to be broken in the US. After much work by many, finally on November 15, 1971, a huge technological barrier was broken. The Intel 4004 became the first microprocessor ever, performing 60,000 operations per second with the power of 2,300 transistors. The project was led by Federico Faggin, who previously worked on the silicon gate metal oxide semiconductor technology in 1968, allowing him in 1971 to create the Intel 4004. This essentially made chips 3 to 5 times faster than ever before. Through this major event, there was a clear uprising in the computer industry. After much work, Intel slowly kept upping their game, and with the release of the Intel 8080, MITs, micro-instrumentation and telemetry systems, used it and arguably created the first truly personal computer, the MITs Altair 8800 in 1974.
A major milestone for us was when we were walking through Harvard Square one time and saw this Popular Electronics magazine.
Having seen this on Popular Electronic magazine sparked the interest in creating programming language for the small machine to operate on. This led to the creation of BASIC, beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code by the dynamic duo Bill Gates and Paul Allen, which broke the barriers of coding at the time. Throughout the 1970s, computers completely overthrew the market, and considering the amount of time that had gone by from its invention, it was remarkable. All personal computers also began using single silicon computer chips. The next big computer that came out was the Apple I. Sounds familiar? Its creator Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs released it to the public in April of 1976. Though it only sold about 200, Apple was only just getting started. Then in 1977, what many experts call the 1977 Trinity was released. The Apple II, the Tandy Radio Shack 80, and the Commodore Personal Electronic Transactor. These three microcomputers were super successful. During this time, games began to popularize as well, especially on the Commodore PET. With these new microcomputers, they began to become common in homes and in schools too, allowing it to grow with society. Then once again, a new competitor entered the arena, IBM.
You're looking at a small portable computer called the IBM 5100.
IBM introduced the IBM-compatible type of computers, which featured abilities for the new computers to connect to various peripherals. One by one, new companies began popping up in the industry, such as Compaq, Dell, and also Xerox.
You come into your office, grab a cup of coffee,
Morning, Fred.
and a Xerox machine presents your morning mail on a screen.
On these new computers, Microsoft, founded earlier by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, the creators of BASIC, began allowing companies to use their operating system MS-DOS. However, Apple countered the IBM-compatible computers with their own similar version, in which they released the Macintosh in 1984. This about ended the era that introduced personal computers into the world. But this was only the beginning of what has lasted decades. Short term, personal computers were an absolute success. Starting from when the Altair 8800 showed up on Popular Electronics in 1975, the industry was booming. Economically, personal computers, starting off cheap, just only became cheaper for consumers. Ever since its invention, it was super small compared to previous computers. This allowed pre-assembled personal computers to be mass-produced. By the 1980s, personal computers had become a common household item. Also, peripherals started becoming way more common, as we see in the Apple Lisa, which introduced the first mouse-controlled graphical user interface. Computers quickly became part of the American lifestyle at businesses, home, and school. Long-term, personal computers were life-changing. Without them, nothing today would be the same. Today's greatest feats are mostly thanks to the computers. Whether it be science, math, or history, everything is based on the web now. Speaking of the web, Wi-Fi, thanks to computers, the internet was made. So much of our lives are centered around the computer. There is literally a community of people who devote their lives to computers in certain aspects. Gaming, a huge part of our culture today, is only achievable through intense computer components that only would have happened thanks to the microprocessor revolution, which ultimately led to multiple core processors. Operating systems are also essential to use computers today. From the early MS-DOS to today's Windows 10, it's been quite a journey. Speaking of that, Microsoft and Apple are still in the game. In fact, they are the biggest competitors in the industry today. In conclusion, the event that sparked such a crucial part of our history, especially modern history, was the microprocessor revolution, breaking the technological barrier that held back compact personal computers from the previously super large ones. CPUs, or processors, are countless times faster and more powerful than the processors of the time of the revolution. Now we produce them with multiple cores, allowing for intense usage of a computer. They are also way cheaper as they require less to manufacture. Today's computers are half the price of the ones 20 years ago. A problem early computers had was storage, which one could say we have mastered today, with the use of hard disk drives to solid-state drives to M.2 drives. Things have only gotten better for the personal computer. Life would completely be different without computers, and we owe it to all who work to help break barriers and revolutionize the world through technology.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think back then, nobody had personal computers.